He called her trash. He mocked her clothes. He told her she didn't belong in his building unless she was emptying the bins. Preston Valcourt thought he was untouchable, the king of the aviation world. But he made one fatal mistake. He judged a book by its cover, without realizing that nobody he just fired holds the deed to his entire empire. You are about to witness the most satisfying, unparalleled act of corporate revenge ever recorded. When her private jet lands on his runway, the ground beneath his feet is going to crumble. This is the story of Keisha Reynolds, and this is what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. The fluorescent lights of Valcourt Aviation's headquarters hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. For Keisha Reynolds, that sound was the soundtrack to her invisibility. She pushed the heavy mail cart down the executive corridor on the 40th floor, the wheels squeaking slightly against the polished marble. She wore a generic grey blazer that was 2 sizes too big and scuffed flats that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a severe practical bun, and she kept her eyes lowered. In a place like this, eye contact was seen as an act of aggression if it came from someone making less than 6 figures. "Move it," a voice snapped. Keisha halted the cart instantly, pulling it tight against the wall. Preston Valcourt breezed past her, a whirlwind of expensive cologne and entitlement. He didn't look at her. He looked through her. To him, she was just architecture, a piece of furniture that occasionally moved mail from one desk to another. Walking beside him was Brittany, his executive assistant, who was frantically tapping on a tablet. "The numbers for the Q3 merger are tanking, Preston," Brittany hissed, trying to keep her voice down. "The board is going to eat us alive. We need that liquidity injection from the KR group, or we can't fuel the fleet for next month." Preston stopped abruptly, causing Brittany to nearly collide with him. He turned, his face flushed with the specific kind of anger that only rich men who have never been told no possess. "Do not speak to me about failure in the hallway." "Brittany," Preston snarled, "we are Valcourt Aviation. We own the ski. This KR group, whoever the hell they are, will sign because I tell them to sign. They're probably some new money tech firm desperate for my validation." He adjusted his silk tie, his eyes finally landing on Keisha, not on her face but on the cart. "You," he barked. Keisha looked up, keeping her expression neutral. "Yes, Mr. Valcourt. Why is there a coffee stain on the carpet near the conference room?" He pointed a manicured finger toward a microscopic drop of brown liquid 5 feet away. "I have the Japanese delegation arriving in 20 minutes. If that isn't gone by the time I walk back out, you're fired. Actually, I don't even know if you work for cleaning or mail, but consider yourself warned." "I'm with internal logistics, sir," Keisha said softly. "I'm delivering the updated runway safety protocols you asked for last week." She reached into her cart and pulled out a thick blue folder. It was marked Urgent Runaway 4 Structural Integrity. Preston looked at the folder as if she had offered him a dead rat. He laughed a short, sharp bark of amusement. "Internal logistics," he sneered, stepping closer, looming over her. "You push a cart. That's your logic. You move paper from point A to point B. You do not analyze my runways. You do not have the capacity to understand what a runway is." He snatched the folder from her hand. Keisha watched as he didn't even open it. He simply turned to Brittany and shoved it into her chest. "Shred this," Preston said, "and get someone to clean that spot. And get this." He gestured vaguely at Keisha. "Obstruction out of the executive wing. I don't want to see her face again until the deal is closed." "Mr. Valcourt," Keisha said, her voice firming up just a fraction. "The report indicates that the tarmac on the north runway, the one you reserved for the VIP arrival, has a sinkhole developing beneath the concrete. if a heavy jet lands there." Preston spun around. The silence in the hallway was deafening. Other employees stuck their heads out of cubicles, then quickly ducked back in. "Did it just speak?" Preston asked Brittany, his eyes wide with mock incredulity. "Did the help just give me engineering advice?" He walked back to Keisha, invading her personal space until she could smell the mint on his breath. "Listen to me very carefully," he whispered. "I have engineers with degrees from MIT. I have consultants who charge more per hour than you make in a year. I do not need advice from a woman wearing shoes from a discount bin. The VIP is landing on the North Runway because it's the only one with the red carpet access. If you open your mouth again, I will ensure you are blacklisted from every job in this city, right down to the fast food drive-thrus. Do you understand?" Keisha held his gaze. For a second, just a split second, Preston felt a chill. Her eyes weren't fearful. They were calculating, dark, deep, and utterly unafraid. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Valcourt," she said. "Good. Now get out." Preston turned on his heel and stormed into his office, slamming the heavy glass door. Keisha stood there for a moment. Brittany looked at her with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Just go okay before he actually fires you, and take the service elevator." Keisha nodded slowly. She placed her hand on the handle of the mail cart. As she turned the corner out of sight of the executive suite, her posture changed. The slump in her shoulders vanished. Her stride lengthened. She pulled a burner phone from her pocket. Not the cheap company phone they issued her, but a sleek encrypted device. She dialed a number. "Talk to me." A deep voice answered on the other end. It was Arthur, her attorney and right-hand man. He shredded the safety report. Keisha said, her voice cool and crisp, completely different from the meek tone she had used moments ago. "I warned you he was arrogant, Keisha." Arthur sighed. "Are we pulling out?" "No," Keisha said, reaching the service elevator and pressing the button. "He wants the VIP on the North Runway. He gets the VIP on the North Runway. Let the plane land." "But Arthur," "Yes, boss. Accelerate the purchase of the outstanding debt. I want to own 51% of Valcourt Aviation by the time my wheels touch the ground. And tell the pilot to prep the G650. I'm done playing the male girl. Consider it done. And Keisha. Yeah. Give him hell." "Oh, I intend to." Keisha smiled, stepping into the elevator. "I'm going to give him a reality check he'll never forget." 3 hours later, the atmosphere inside the Valcourt boardroom was toxic. Preston Valcourt paced the length of the long mahogany table, sweat beading on his forehead. The air conditioning was blasting, yet he felt like he was roasting alive. "Where are they?" Preston shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "The KR Group rep was supposed to be here at 2:00 p.m. It is 2:15. Around the table, the board of directors sat in uncomfortable silence. These were men and women who had ridden the wave of Preston's father's success, only to watch Preston slowly bleed the company dry with bad investments, lawsuits, and an ego the size of a jumbo jet. "Maybe they got wind of the Q3 report," muttered George, the CFO, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Preston, we are leveraged to the hilt. If this mystery investor doesn't sign today, the banks seize the hangars on Friday." "They will sign," Preston roared. "They have to. Who wouldn't want a piece of Valcourt? We are a legacy brand. We are a sinking ship," George shot back, losing his patience. "And this KR Group, nobody knows who runs it. They appeared out of nowhere 6 months ago, buying up aerospace tech fuel logistics, and now they're looking at us. We are at their mercy." "I am never at anyone's mercy," Preston hissed. He walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling tarmac of the private airfield below. From this height, the planes looked like toys. He saw the shimmering heat haze rising off the asphalt. He saw the North Runway, freshly painted, a red carpet rolled out, waiting for the arrival of the KMR, Group's CEO. "Who is the CEO anyway?" Preston asked, not turning around. "Brittany. Did we ever get a name?" Brittany, standing in the corner, checked her tablet nervously. "No, sir. All correspondence goes through a law firm in Zurich. They just refer to the principal as the chair. They said the chair prefers privacy." "Privacy," Preston scoffed. "Probably some hideously ugly recluse, or a kid who inherited daddy's money and wants to play with planes." Suddenly, the intercom on the table buzzed. "Mr. Valcourt." It was the control tower. "What is it?" Preston snapped. "Sir, we have a flight plan filing appearing on the radar. Call sign Nemesis 1. It's a Gulfstream G650ER, ETA 5 minutes. "Nemesis," Preston frowned. "What kind of stupid call sign is that?" "Is it them?" "Affirmative, sir. It's the KR Group jet." Preston straightened his jacket. He ran a hand through his hair. "All right. Everyone look alive. I want smiles. I want confidence. We are not begging. We are offering them the privilege of partnering with us." He looked at George. "And hide those financial reports. If they ask, our liquidity is fluid." "That's fraud, Preston," George warned. "That's business," Preston countered. Down in the basement levels of the building, Keisha Reynolds was shedding her skin. She stood in the locker room designated for the janitorial staff. The grey blazer was in the trash. The scuffed flats were kicked into a corner. She opened her locker, the one she had maintained for 3 months while undercover. Inside hung a garment bag. She unzipped it. Inside was a tailored white power suit, cut from Italian silk, sharp enough to cut glass. She pulled it on. It fit her like armor. She sat on the wooden bench and swapped the flats for a pair of red-bottomed stilettos. She let her hair down, shaking out the curls she had kept tightly restrained. She applied a layer of bold, dark red lipstick. She looked in the cracked mirror of the locker room. The tired, invisible male girl was gone. In her place stood Keisha Reynolds, self-made billionaire owner of Reynolds Global, and as of 10 minutes ago, the majority shareholder of Valcourt Aviation. She checked her phone. A text from Arthur. The wire transfer cleared. "You own the debt. You own the building. You own him." Keisha smirked. She typed back, "Showtime." She walked out of the locker room, her heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete floor. She didn't take the service elevator this time. She walked straight to the main lobby elevators. A security guard, a man named Frank, whom she had brought coffee to every morning for weeks, looked up. He blinked, confused. He recognized the face, but the aura was completely alien. Keisha," he stammered. You can't go up there. You know the rules. Staff exit is in the back." Keisha stopped and smiled at him, a genuine, warm smile. "It's okay, Frank. I'm not staff today. And by the way, your wife's surgery, I covered the copay. Check your account." Frank's jaw dropped. "What? How did you take the rest of the day off, Frank?" She stepped into the glass elevator and pressed the button for the roof access, not the boardroom. She wasn't going to the meeting room. She was going to the tarmac. She had to meet her own plane. Up in the boardroom, Preston was watching the sky. "There it is," he murmured. A sleek black jet sliced through the clouds. It was beautiful, a beast of a machine. It banked sharply, lining up with the North Runway. "Look at that landing gear," Preston said, drooling slightly over the machinery. "That's customized. Who is this person?" The jet descended. It hit the tarmac of the north runway. Screech! A horrible grinding noise echoed even through the soundproof glass of the boardroom. Preston watched in horror as the right wheel of the jet's landing gear hit the exact spot Keisha had pointed out on the map earlier. The concrete weakened by the sinkhole beneath gave way. The pavement collapsed. The jet's wing dipped violently, scraping along the ground, sending up a shower of sparks that looked like fireworks from hell. The plane spun 180 degrees tires, blowing out before coming to a grinding, smoking halt just yards from the grass. "My God," George shouted. "They crashed on our runway." Preston's face went white. "The sinkhole," he whispered. She told me about the sinkhole." "Who told you?" Brittany screamed. "Preston, who told you?" "The mail girl," Preston muttered, paralyzed. "The mail girl said the north runway was compromised. And you let them land anyway." George grabbed his chest. "We're done. The liability alone. We're finished." "Get down there," Preston yelled, snapping out of his shock. "Get the fire crews. Get the lawyers. I need to spin this." He sprinted out of the boardroom, rushing toward the elevators. He had to get to the tarmac. He had to apologize, beg, bribe, whatever it took. He didn't know that the person stepping out of that smoking plane wasn't a stranger. He didn't know that the victim was already in the building. The chaos had begun, and Keisha Reynolds was just getting started. The tarmac was a chaotic symphony of screaming sirens and shouting men. Fire foam sprayed in wide white arcs over the smoking landing gear of the Gulfstream G650ER. The smell of aviation fuel was thick and nauseating, mixing with the scent of burnt rubber and scorched concrete. Preston Valcourt ran toward the scene, his expensive Italian loafers slapping against the asphalt. He was out of breath, his tie flapping over his shoulder. Behind him, a phalanx of nervous executives and legal counsel struggled to keep up. "Is everyone alive?" Preston screamed at the fire chief, a burly man named Henderson, who was directing the foam cannons. "Pilots are out," Henderson shouted back over the roar of a diesel engine. "They're shaken up but fine. No passengers on board, according to the manifest." Preston stopped dead in his tracks. "No passengers." He blinked, wiping sweat from his eyes. "What do you mean, no passengers, the chair of KR?" "Group was supposed to be on that plane." "Empty, sir. Just the flight crew." Preston felt a wave of relief wash over him, instantly followed by a surge of renewed arrogance. If the investor wasn't on board, then nobody important had died. If nobody important had died, this was just an insurance claim. A very expensive, embarrassing insurance claim, but something he could survive. He spun around to face his team. George, the CFO, was hyperventilating into a paper bag. Brittany was typing furiously on her phone, trying to block the press from getting aerial shots. "All right, listen to me." Preston barked, his voice regaining its command. "This is a mechanical failure. The landing gear malfunctioned. That is the narrative. Do you hear me? The runway was fine. The plane was faulty." "Sir." A trembling operations manager named Timothy stepped forward. "The sinkhole, the report." "Shut up." Preston lunged at him. "There was no report. There is no sinkhole. If anyone asks, that concrete failed because the jet came in too heavy and too fast. We are the victims here. We are going to sue KR Group for damaging our facility." Preston was manic now, constructing a web of lies in real time. He pointed a shaking finger at the smoking wreckage. "Look at that! They tried to kill us. They sent a defective plane to ruin my reputation. Is that your official statement, Mr. Valcourt?" The voice came from behind the cluster of executives. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the fire trucks like a razor blade. It was amplified, cool, and terrifyingly calm. Preston turned around. A black limousine had pulled up onto the tarmac near the hangar bay doors without anyone noticing. The driver was holding the back door open, but the person speaking hadn't come from the car. Walking toward them from the main terminal building was a woman. She was flanked by 4 men in dark suits who moved with the precision of Secret Service agents. Preston squinted against the glare of the sun. The woman was wearing a white silk suit that glowed in the afternoon light. She wore dark sunglasses and heels that looked sharp enough to puncture a lung. She walked with a predator's grace, slow, deliberate, inevitable. "Who is that?" Preston demanded. "Security. Get her off the field. This is an active crash site." The woman didn't stop. She kept coming. As she got closer, she reached up and removed her sunglasses. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain tried to reject what his eyes were seeing. He recognized the face. He recognized the bone structure, the eyes, the skin. But the context was wrong. This face belonged to a grey, shapeless blazer. It belonged to a mail cart. It belonged to a nobody. "You," Preston whispered. The maid." Keisha stopped 10 feet away from him. Her team fanned out behind her. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and a briefcase, stepped forward. "This was Arthur Reynolds," Arthur said, handing Keisha a tablet. "The damage assessment is already coming in from the drone footage. Looks like a classic subterranean collapse. Exactly as predicted in the report you tried to deliver at 10 a.m. Keisha took the tablet, not looking at it. She kept her eyes locked on Preston. "You," Preston stammered, his face turning a violent shade of red. "What are you doing in those clothes? Did you steal them? I fired you. I told you to get out." He looked around at his employees, desperate for validation. "Why is the cleaning lady standing on my tarmac?" "Someone arrest her." "Mr. Valcourt," Keisha said. Her voice was smooth, devoid of the submissive stutter she had faked for 3 months. "I suggest you lower your voice. You are currently screaming at the owner of the aircraft you just destroyed." The silence that descended on the group was absolute. Even the fire trucks seemed to quiet down. Preston let out a hysterical laugh. You own." He pointed at the wreckage of the $50 million jet. "You push a mail cart. You make minimum wage. You are trash." "My name is Keisha Reynolds," she said. "I am the CEO and founder of the KR Group, and for the last 90 days I have been conducting an undercover due diligence audit of this company. And frankly, Preston, I'm not impressed." Preston staggered back as if he'd been physically slapped. No, that's impossible. This is a prank. Brittany." "Tell me this is a prank." Brittany was staring at Keisha, her mouth agape. Keisha Reynolds," she whispered. "Oh my God. It fits. I warned you." Keisha continued, taking a step closer. The heels clicked ominously. "I stood in the hallway 3 hours ago, and I looked you in the eye. I told you the north runway had a sinkhole. I handed you the engineering report, and you told me that I didn't have the capacity to understand what a runway is." She gestured elegantly to the smoking hole in the ground where the expensive jet sat crumpled. "Do you think I understand it now, Preston?" "You set me up," Preston shrieked. You crashed that plane on purpose. The plane was remote piloted for the final approach, once we confirmed you hadn't closed the runway," Keisha said coldly. "I was willing to sacrifice a jet to prove a point. Because unlike you, I value human life over machinery. I wasn't going to let a passenger land on that death trap. But I needed the world to see your negligence in high definition." She pointed to the hangar roof. Preston looked up. A camera crew was stationed there. "We've been live streaming the approach," Keisha said, "and we recorded the audio in the hallway this morning. The world just heard you call your safety inspector trash. The world just watched your negligence destroy an asset. Your stock dropped 40% in the last 10 minutes. Preston looked at his phone. It was buzzing incessantly. Messages from the board, from the bank, from his father. "You ruined me," he hissed, his eyes wild. "I will sue you. I will bury you. I have lawyers who will eat you alive." "Arthur," Keisha said, holding out her hand. Arthur placed a blue folder in her hand. It looked exactly like the one Preston had nearly shredded earlier, but this one was stamped with the seal of the Federal Aviation Administration and the Securities and Exchange Commission. "You don't have lawyers, Preston," Keisha said. "You have creditors, and as of 2:30 p.m. today, I am the biggest one." The transition from the sweltering heat of the tarmac to the air-conditioned sterility of the executive conference room was jarring. Preston sat at the head of the table, though he looked less like a king and more like a prisoner awaiting execution. His suit jacket was off, his shirt was stained with sweat, and his hands were shaking uncontrollably. On one side of the table sat the Valcourt board of directors, men and women Preston had bullied for years. They wouldn't look at him. They were looking at the woman at the other end of the table. Keisha sat with perfect posture. She hadn't broken a sweat. Arthur sat to her right, arranging documents in neat piles. "This is illegal," Preston muttered. "This is entrapment, corporate espionage." "It's called due diligence," Arthur corrected him, peering over his spectacles. "Ms. Reynolds has every right to inspect a company she intends to purchase. The fact that she chose to do it from the mailroom floor is unconventional but perfectly legal." "I'm not selling." Preston slammed his fist on the table. "I'm the CEO. I own the controlling stake." "Actually," Keisha spoke up, her voice silencing the room. "You don't." She slid a document across the polished mahogany. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of Preston. "That is a call regarding your loans with Meridian Bank," Keisha said. "You used your controlling shares as collateral for the Dubai expansion project, the project that failed. The bank gave me an extension," Preston argued. "The bank sold the debt." Keisha smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood. "To me, yesterday." Preston picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the legalese. "Transfer of debt obligation. Assignee KR Global Holdings." "You defaulted technically 3 weeks ago," Keisha explained. "The bank was being polite because of your father's name. I am not your father's friend, Preston. I am calling the debt. Pay me $150 million right now, or forfeit the shares." Preston looked at George. "George, pay her wire the money." George looked down at his hands. "We don't have it, Preston. We have maybe $4 million in liquid cash. The rest is tied up in the fleet." "Then sell a plane. You just crashed the most expensive one we were trying to buy," Arthur noted dryly. "And with the sinkhole on the main runway, the FAA has just grounded all flights out of this facility, pending a geological survey. You can't fly your planes out to sell them. You are dead in the water." Preston slumped back in his chair. The reality was crushing him. The walls of the empire he had inherited, the empire he had treated like a playground, were closing in. Why? Preston whispered. He looked at Keisha. Really looked at her, searching for the reason. Why go to all this trouble? Why dress up as a maid? Why humiliate me? Keisha leaned forward. The playful irony was gone from her face. In its place was a cold, hard anger that had been simmering for years. "Do you remember a man named David Reynolds?" she asked. Preston frowned. "No, who? He was a mechanic, one of the best. He worked here 15 years ago. He found a crack in a turbine blade on a flight scheduled for a senator. He grounded the plane." Preston waved his hand dismissively. "I don't track every grease monkey who turns a wrench." "You came down to the hangar," Keisha continued, her voice tightening. "You were just a VP then. Daddy's boy. You told him he was delaying progress. You told him he was being overcautious. You fired him on the spot for insubordination. You blacklisted him. You told the other airlines he stole tools so he couldn't get hired anywhere else." Preston shrugged. "So he was probably incompetent." "He was my father," Keisha said. The room went deadly quiet. "He lost his pension. He lost his health insurance. 6 months later, when the cancer came back, he couldn't afford the treatment. He died feeling like a failure because a spoiled brat in a suit decided to flex his power." Keisha stood up. She towered over the table. "I was 22. I promised him on his deathbed that I would clear his name. I didn't just want to sue you, Preston. I wanted to take the thing you value most, your status, your name, your company." "You can't do this based on a grudge," Preston pleaded, looking at the board members. "This is personal. It's a conflict of interest." "It's business," Keisha corrected. "And it's justice. I built my own company from the ground up. I studied. I worked. I scrapped for every dollar while you burned millions on parties and bad deals. And when I came here 3 months ago, I wanted to see if you had changed. I wanted to see if the culture had improved." She laughed, a harsh sound. "And what did I find? I found a CEO who judges people by their shoes, who shreds safety reports because they come from the help, who treats his staff like furniture. You haven't changed, Preston. You've just gotten worse." She turned to the board of directors. "I'm exercising the default clause. I am seizing the collateral shares. As of this moment, I control 51% of Valcourt Aviation." She looked at the grey-haired man at the end of the table. "Mr. Henderson, you are the chairman of the board. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the CEO." Mr. Henderson didn't hesitate. He had hated Preston for a decade. "Seconded," he said instantly. "All in favor?" Keisha asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even George raised his hand, looking apologetically at Preston. "Motion carried," Keisha said. She looked down at Preston. "You're fired." Preston sat frozen. His world had ended in the span of an hour. "You can't," he whispered. "I just did," Keisha said. "Security." The doors opened. Frank, the security guard from the lobby, walked in. He looked nervous but determined. "Frank," Keisha said warmly, "please escort Mr. Valcourt from the building. He is no longer an employee. Collect his badge and his phone." Preston stood up, shaking with rage. "You think you can run this place? You're a nobody. You don't know how to run an airline." "I know that you don't ignore sinkholes," Keisha replied calmly. "I think I'll be just fine." Frank stepped forward. "Let's go, Mr. Valcourt." "Don't touch me." Preston swatted Frank's hand away. He looked at Keisha one last time, his eyes full of venom. "This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over. It is for you," Keisha said, turning her back on him to look out the window at her smoking jet. Get him out of my sight! As Preston was dragged out of the room, shouting obscenities, Keisha let out a long breath. She felt Arthur's hand on her shoulder. "You did it, kid," Arthur whispered. "David would be proud." "We're not done yet, Arthur," Keisha said, her eyes scanning the terrified faces of the remaining board members. "Now we have to clean up the mess he made, and we're going to start by draining the swamp." She turned back to the table. The board members stiffened. "Gentlemen and ladies," Keisha said, sitting in Preston's chair. It was still warm. "We have a lot of work to do. But first, let's talk about the janitorial staff's wages." The first week of Keisha Reynolds's reign at Valcourt Aviation was less of a transition and more of an exorcism. The physical changes were immediate. The executive washroom, which had previously been stocked with imported soaps and towels, softer than clouds, and locked to anyone below the rank of vice president, was opened to the general staff. The portrait of Preston Valcourt that hung in the lobby, an oil painting commissioned for an obscene $40,000, was taken down. In its place, Keisha hung a framed, tattered photograph of the original mechanics crew from 20 years ago, the crew her father had been a part of. But while the atmosphere inside the building was shifting from fear to cautious optimism, the atmosphere outside was turning venomous. Preston Valcourt was not a man who knew how to lose. Stripped of his company, his car, and his corporate credit cards, he had retreated to his penthouse apartment downtown, one of the few assets Keisha hadn't been able to seize immediately, because it was in his mother's name. The apartment was a wreck. Takeout containers littered the glass coffee tables. Bottles of expensive scotch lay empty on the floor. Preston hadn't shaved in 4 days. He paced the living room, wearing a silk robe that smelled of stale alcohol, muttering to himself. "She can't do this," he whispered, staring at the city skyline. "It's my name on the building. Valcourt, not Reynolds." His phone buzzed on the couch. He scrambled for it, hoping it was George telling him it was all a mistake. It wasn't George. It was a contact he hadn't spoken to in years. A man named Spencer, a tabloid journalist who specialized in crisis management, which was a polite way of saying he specialized in destroying reputations for money. "I saw the news, Preston." Spencer's voice was oily and smooth. "Looks like you took a hell of a tumble, replaced by the maid. That's got to sting." "She's not a maid," Preston spat, gripping the phone tight enough to crack the screen. "She's a con artist. She manipulated the stock price. She sabotaged my runway." "That's a strong accusation," Spencer said. "You have proof." "I don't need proof," Preston hissed. "I need a narrative. Look, Spencer, she crashed a jet to make a point. That's reckless endangerment. If we spin this right, if we make people think she's mentally unstable, a vengeful, angry woman with too much money and a grudge, the board will get spooked. The FAA will investigate her, not me." "I can write that story," Spencer said slowly. "But stories like that aren't free, and I hear your accounts are frozen." "I have a stash," Preston lied. "Cash, in a safe. I can get you 50 grand by tonight. But I need the headline to be brutal. I want her to be afraid to walk out of her house." 50 grand gets you the front page," Spencer agreed. "Meet me at the Indigo Lounge in an hour. Bring the cash. And Preston, bring me dirt. I need emails, texts, anything that makes her look unhinged." Preston hung up. A cruel smile spread across his face. He didn't have access to the company servers anymore, but he knew someone who did. He dialed Brittany. Back at the Valcourt Tower, Brittany was sitting at her desk, trembling. She had expected to be fired on day one. She had been Preston's gatekeeper, his enabler. She had laughed at his jokes and shredded the documents he told her to shred. When her phone rang and she saw Preston's name, she nearly dropped it. She let it go to voicemail. 5 seconds later, a text appeared. I know about the offshore accounts you helped me set up for the consulting fees. Help me, or I take you down with me. Brittany felt the blood drain from her face. She looked toward the CEO's office. The glass door was open. Keisha was inside, sitting at the desk, with Arthur reviewing huge stacks of payroll ledgers. Brittany stood up on shaky legs and walked into the office. Ms. Reynolds. Keisha looked up. She looked tired, but focused. Yes, Brittany. I told you call me Keisha. Keisha. Brittany swallowed hard. She thought about the text. She thought about Preston's rage. Then she looked at Keisha, who had just approved a 15% raise for the cleaning staff that morning. Preston just messaged me, Brittany blurted out. He's blackmailing me. He wants me to steal files. He's meeting a reporter named Spencer to run a smear campaign against you. Keisha put her pen down. The room went silent. Arthur looked up over his glasses, his expression darkening. He's trying to frame you for the crash, Brittany continued, tears welling in her eyes. He wants to say you endangered the pilots on purpose. He wants to paint you as crazy. Keisha leaned back in her chair. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. Thank you for telling me, Brittany, Keisha said softly. That took courage. I helped him steal money. Brittany confessed the words tumbling out. Before you came, he made me set up shell accounts in the Caymans. I can show you where they are. I don't want to go to jail. Keisha stood up and walked around the desk. She handed Brittany a tissue. Arthur, Keisha said, her eyes locked on the city view outside the window. How much cash do we have in the petty cash safe? About 5,000, Arthur replied. Not enough, Keisha mused. She turned to Brittany. Text him back. Tell him you'll do it. Tell him you're stealing the personnel files that prove I have a history of mental illness. Brittany blinked. What? But you don't. I know. Keisha smiled, a plan forming in her mind. But Preston believes what he wants to believe. We're going to give him a file. Arthur, get the fabrication team. I want to create a fake medical history. Make it look convincing. Hallucinations, paranoia, the works. You want to give him ammunition? Arthur asked, confused. I want to give him a loaded gun that points backward, Keisha said. If he runs a story based on forged medical documents that we planted, documents that can be proven false in seconds, he won't just be a disgraced CEO. He'll be sued for libel defamation and using stolen confidential medical records. It's a felony, Arthur. She turned back to Brittany. Can you deliver the file to him? Can you look him in the eye and lie? Brittany wiped her tears. She thought about the years of verbal abuse, the coffee thrown at her, the constant fear. Yes, Brittany said, her voice hardening. I can lie to him. I learned from the best. The headline hit the internet the next morning like a bomb. Billionaire mad woman, the dark secret behind the Valcourt crash. The article written by Spencer was scathing. It claimed that Keisha Reynolds was a vengeful, unstable heiress, ignoring her self-made status, who had orchestrated the crash as a sick theatrical stunt. It cited leaked internal documents, claiming Keisha had been institutionalized twice for delusions of grandeur. By 9:00 a.m. camera crews were camped out in front of Valcourt Aviation. The stock, which had stabilized, began to wobble again. The board of directors was blowing up Keisha's phone. "This is a disaster," George moaned during the emergency meeting. "Investors are pulling out. They're saying we have a lunatic at the helm. Keisha, is any of this true?" "Were you in a sanitarium in 2018? Keisha sat at the head of the table sipping her coffee. She looked remarkably calm for a woman being crucified on social media. "No, George," she said. "In 2018, I was closing a deal for a logistics hub in Singapore. You can check my passport." "Then where did these documents come from?" George waved the tabloid on his tablet. "From me," Keisha said. The room went silent. "I needed Preston to overplay his hand," she explained. "If I just sued him for money, he'd drag it out for years. I needed him to commit a crime so undeniable that the authorities would have no choice but to step in. Publishing stolen medical records is a crime. Publishing forged medical records to manipulate a stock price, that's market manipulation. That's federal." "But the public doesn't know they're fake," George argued. "The mob is outside. They're calling for your resignation." "Then let's go talk to them," Keisha said, standing up and smoothing her blazer. "You can't go out there," Arthur warned. "They'll tear you apart." "I spent 10 years building a company from nothing," Keisha said. "I've been underestimated by banks, by competitors, and by men like Preston Valcourt. A few cameras don't scare me." She walked down to the lobby. Frank, the head of security, tried to stop her. "Ms. Reynolds, it's not safe." "Open the doors, Frank." The glass doors slid open. The noise was instantaneous. A wall of flashes and shouting reporters greeted her. "Ms. Reynolds, did you crash the plane on purpose? Are you off your medication? Is it true you hallucinate that you're a pilot?" Keisha walked to the podium that had been set up for press conferences. She didn't have notes. She didn't have a teleprompter. She gripped the sides of the podium and waited. She just stared at them until the shouting slowly died down, replaced by a confused silence. "The documents published by Mr. Spencer this morning." Keisha began, her voice clear and ringing. "Claim that I was a patient at the St. Jude's mental health facility in Nevada from June to August of 2018. She paused. St. Jude's mental health facility in Nevada burned down in 2015, she said. It didn't exist in 2018. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Reporters started checking their phones. "Furthermore," Keisha continued, "the signature on the diagnosis form belongs to a Dr. A.J. Cronin. That is a fictional character from a novel, not a real doctor. If Mr. Valcourt and his journalist friend had bothered to fact-check the stolen files they paid $50,000 for, they would have known that." She leaned into the microphone. "Preston Valcourt didn't just lie to you," she told the cameras. "He insulted your intelligence. He thinks the media is stupid enough to print anything he feeds them. He tried to weaponize mental health stigma to cover up his own corporate negligence." Across town in his penthouse, Preston watched the live feed on his massive TV. The color drained from his face. The file Brittany had given him, he hadn't read it closely. He had just seen the words, "diagnosis unstable," and handed it to Spencer. "No," Preston whispered. "No, no, no." His phone started ringing. It wasn't Brittany. It wasn't Spencer. It was the police. Back at the press conference, Keisha wasn't done. "I am not a victim," she said, her voice rising with passion. "And I am not a nobody. I am the woman who is going to fix this company. We are going to rebuild the runway. We are going to rehire the mechanics Preston fired to cut costs. And we are going to start a scholarship fund for underprivileged engineers in the name of David Reynolds, my father." She pointed to the Valcourt sign behind her. "And one last thing. Effective immediately, we are rebranding. This is no longer Valcourt Aviation." The screen behind her flickered. The logo changed. The stylized V was replaced by a golden phoenix rising from the ashes. "Welcome to Phoenix Air," Keisha announced. The crowd erupted, not with anger, but with questions frantic and excited. The narrative had flipped in seconds. She wasn't the villain. She was the hero who had outsmarted the bully. As Keisha walked back into the lobby, Brittany was waiting for her. Brittany was crying again, but this time it looked like relief. "He called me," Brittany said, holding up her phone. "He's screaming. He says he's coming, here." "Let him come," Keisha said coolly. "Frank?" "Yes, ma'am." Frank stepped forward, looking prouder than he had in 20 years. "If Mr. Valcourt steps foot on the property, do not restrain him," Keisha ordered. "Let him in. I want everyone to see him. I want the cameras to see the real Preston Valcourt." 20 minutes later, a silver sports car screeched up to the curb. Preston jumped out. He looked deranged. His robe was gone, replaced by a wrinkled suit, but his eyes were wild. He stormed past the stunned reporters, shoving a cameraman aside. He burst into the lobby. "Where is she?" Preston screamed, his voice cracking. "Where is the witch?" Keisha stood on the mezzanine balcony, looking down at him. The entire staff had gathered in the lobby to watch. "I'm right here, Preston," she called down. Preston looked up. His face twisted in hate. "You set me up. You gave me fake files. That's fraud. It's a trap for a rat," Keisha corrected. "And you took the cheese." Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass walls of the lobby. "You can't do this to me," Preston yelled, running toward the stairs. "My father built this. I am Valcourt." Frank stepped in front of the stairs. He didn't use force. He just stood there, arms crossed, a wall of muscle. "Get out of my way, janitor." Preston swung a fist at Frank. It was a weak, flailing punch. Frank caught Preston's wrist mid-air with ease. "I'm not a janitor, Mr. Valcourt," Frank said, his voice deep and satisfyingly loud. "I'm the head of security for Phoenix Air, and you are trespassing." The police burst through the doors. 4 officers. They didn't head for Keisha. They headed straight for Preston. "Preston Valcourt?" the lead officer asked. "We have a warrant for your arrest for attempted extortion, possession of stolen property, and fraud." "She did it!" Preston screamed as they cuffed him, wrestling him to the ground. "Arrest her! She's the one. She's the nobody." The cameras flashed blindingly as Preston was hauled up, his expensive suit, disheveled, his dignity completely gone. As they dragged him out the door, he looked back one last time. He saw Keisha standing on the balcony, flanked by Arthur, Brittany, and George. She didn't look happy. She didn't look triumphant. She just looked done. She raised a hand in a small, final wave. "Goodbye, Preston," she mouthed. The doors closed, the sirens faded. The lobby was quiet for a heartbeat, and then spontaneously applause broke out. It started with the receptionists, then the cleaning crew, then the engineers, and finally the executives. Keisha closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. The war was over. But the work was just beginning. 1 year later, the air inside the Phoenix Air hangar didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like oil coffee and ambition. Keisha walked across the hangar floor, the clicking of her heels now a sound that inspired respect rather than dismissal. She wasn't wearing a suit today. She was wearing a Phoenix Air flight jacket and jeans. "Morning, boss," a mechanic shouted from the wing of a Boeing 737. "Watch that torque wrench, Miller," Keisha called back with a smile. "If I see a stripped bolt, you're buying lunch." The mechanic laughed. It was a genuine sound. Brittany walked up beside her holding a tablet. She looked healthier, happier. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. "Quarterly reports are in, Keisha. We're up 22% since the rebrand. And the new scholarship program just accepted its 50th applicant. A kid from the South Side who wants to be an avionics tech." Good. Keisha nodded. Make sure he gets a full ride. Books, tools, everything. They stopped at the far end of the hangar, where a large bronze plaque had been mounted on the wall. It was simple, polished, and permanent. The David Reynolds Hangar. Dedicated to the mechanics who keep us safe. Excellence is in the details. Keisha reached out and touched the cold metal. Arthur stepped up beside her, his hands in his pockets. He would have hated the bronze. Arthur chuckled softly. He would have said it was a waste of good metal that could be used for spare parts. I know. Keisha smiled, tears pricking her eyes. But he would have loved the shop. It's clean, Arthur. It's honest. And Preston? Arthur asked quietly. Sentencing was yesterday. Keisha said, her face hardening slightly. 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. And when he gets out, he's barred from holding a corporate officer position for life. He'll never run a company again. He thought you were a nobody, Arthur mused, looking at the busy hangar. He made the mistake of thinking power comes from a title, Keisha replied. She turned to look at her team, Frank joking with the security staff, Brittany leading a meeting, the mechanics working with pride. Power doesn't come from a private jet or a corner office, Keisha said, turning to leave. It comes from knowing exactly who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. He saw a janitor. I saw a CEO in waiting. That was his loss. She walked out into the sunlight, the roar of a taking-off jet filling the air. It was the sound of victory. And that is how Preston Valcourt lost everything, not because of a market crash, but because he was too arrogant to see the value in the people right in front of him. Keisha proved that you should never judge someone by their uniform, because the hand that sweeps the floor might just be the hand that holds the deed to your future. What did you think of Preston's punishment? Did he deserve 5 years, or should it have been longer? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of hard-earned karma and corporate justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a new tale coming next week about a cheating husband who realizes his wife is his judge in court. You won't want to miss that. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're really talking to.